This is One on One. Hi, Steve Adubato. More importantly, we're at the Healthcare Foundation in New Jersey. We just finished a very compelling, important conversation called Breaking the Cycle of Teen Abuse and Bullying. We're joined by one of our panelists who contributed so much. He is Dr. J.J. Ferrito, a licensed clinical psychologist, leads a program at Perth Amboy High School for at-risk students ages 16 to 19. Good to see you, J.J.
Thanks for having me.
Most significant takeaway for you in that conversation, particularly as it relates to the role of schools to combat and deal with the challenge of teen abuse and bullying?
Well, I think what stood out most to me, honestly, was actually something that we were kind of just blossoming into as the conversation was coming to a close, which is the responsibility that schools have.
Sure.
And to me, what I have found in my work consulting with schools and working in schools is that educators have a tremendous capacity to promote social emotional skills in students in a meaningful way when given an appropriate amount of support and an appropriate opportunity to do so.
What does it look like,
I think
promoting this?
I mean, a lot of it comes down to making time for staff to be with one another, to build a community among the staff so that the culture can permeate throughout the building. You know, oftentimes in our schools now, there's such a pressure to perform, and there's so many different programs running in different directions that things become disorganized, and there's a lack of overarching lens and kind of togetherness to allow things to be coherent, even for the students to get a consistent message.
Is that a lot to expect from teachers, from educators, and administrators who have so many other pressures?
I think it is, but I think similar, and coming back to our discussion, right, it's about how we prioritize and the type of leaders that we have in our buildings. So for example, in our program at Perth Amboy, our principal is Miss Yolanda Gomez, and she is a dynamic, inspiring, compassionate, loving woman.
What's her message about teen bullying and abuse?
Her message is that we need to bring these kids in close to show them what it's like to experience a loving relationship so that that's what they seek out in the future. And that's what she does.
How difficult is it, or not, to get teens to talk openly about abuse, bullying, whether it be face-to-face, online, et cetera, et cetera?
It can be tremendously difficult for them to have a genuine discussion about it. There's lots of different influence from various formats, right? So social media, for example. So you have catchphrases, you have ways of saying things that they borrow from different places, and for them, that's their way of saying that they are with it or that they understand or they're, you know, in a place where they can communicate about the times. But to actually get their genuine opinion is a whole other issue. And a lot of times it becomes a matter of their own individual culture and what they've experienced. So for example, in Perth Amboy, we have a high Hispanic, Latino, Latina, whatever phrase you're most comfortable with, population. And for a lot of the men, but also for a lot of the girls, the expectation is you don't talk about these things outside of the family. You
don't talk about the fact that I feel as if I'm a victim of abuse or bullying?
Correct.
Because?
Because it's not for the world to see. It's for our family to resolve.
Is it seen as some sort of breaking a code, an unwritten code?
Yeah, and sometimes it's explicitly stated to them. These are things that you should not be saying to other people. And sometimes it starts earlier in their life, right? We talk about a cycle of abuse. Yes. Oftentimes, the students that I'm working with, at least some of them, and throughout my work in different settings, have experienced abuse themselves in their household.
Right in the house.
And so the culture starts with secrecy in the household of how you handle that abuse from your own parent or from sometimes a sibling. And that secrecy then carries on as you go forward throughout your life of these are things that we don't talk about with other people.
You know, one of the subjects that we talked extensively about was social media related abuse and bullying for teens. How pervasive a problem?
I mean, I think we see it everywhere, really. And I think part of the issue is, you know, we talked about the idea of upstanders and people intervening, but to me...
Upstander is someone who
would be willing to speak up and stand by someone's side and say that others should stop what they're doing, right? And to stop them in their tracks and to voice their support for the person who's being victimized. It takes a lot. But I think part of it is also, if you have a deep understanding of relationships, then it's that much easier to understand why it's important to stand up. If you haven't felt a meaningful connection, if you don't feel like you've had someone that you can rely on in your life, who would be there, who's proven themselves trustworthy, then you don't come to expect it from other people, and you don't come to see the world in that light. And so then the idea that you would stick up for someone else in social media or in real life or any other platform when there's not a depth of relationship, or you can't even connect with necessarily how they're feeling in that moment, is a lot to ask from someone. You know, I think a lot of times we bring ourselves to do good because we can not just empathize, but we can relate, right? We know the connections that we have. A mother gets upset when she sees another child hurt because she knows what it's like when her child is hurt. And so those moments, those deep relationship bonds that you experience can form how you view others and how you then interact with them. And whether or not you see a good person when you look across, a person who deserves to be stood up for, or whether or not you think of them as another someone that you can't trust and maybe they had this coming in the first place.
Before I let you go, I'm curious about something. I often wonder how people are influenced and ultimately motivated to go into the work that they're into. The work you do every day with these young people, what do you think the primary reason or reasons are that you do this?
I mean, for me, a lot of it is about opportunity. You know, my parents came here with little to nothing. From Italy, from Sicily, and were completely poor. And my mother grew up without a father, you know, and they had very little opportunity. And they strived and they worked their life supporting one another. My parents knew each other from the time that they were 8 years old, to build a better life consciously for their children. And they showed us that unconditional love. And they showed us how you can work hard to earn and to not only lift yourself up, but to lift up the people around you.
And that's a big part of why you are who you are and what you do.
Absolutely, because I want to be able to share that message, build relationships with kids, and be able to empower them to recognize that they can do those things too. Your circumstance now is not what it has to be, and you can choose and actively create who you are in the world and what kind of influence you have.
Thank you, JJ.
Absolutely,
Well
thank you so
done.
much.
One-on-One with Steve Adubato has been a production of the Caucus Educational Corporation, celebrating over 30 years of broadcast excellence. Funding for this edition of One-on-One with Steve Adubato has been provided by the Northward Center, the Healthcare Foundation of New Jersey, RWJ Barnabas Health, New Jersey Sharing Network, United Airlines, TD Bank, and by Berkeley College. Transportation provided by Airbrook Limousine, serving the metropolitan New York, New Jersey area.